Okay, so part 4 of our renovation project. We've definitely had some progress this week. So first, we got a door now, which is nice. We had electrical inspection on Monday, and we passed pretty easily this time. We had the windows removed from our dining room and moved over here to the entrance. We had the installers from the fireplace company come in, and they did all the venting and installed the fireplace. So now that's all good to go. The vent runs out the back side of the unit here. The casement window was supposed to come in, but it didn't come in on the same truck. So we have it packed with insulation so that we can open up the rest of the house. Contractors cut the hole out where the windows were, so now we have a big gaping hole actually leading into our house. It's actually 6 foot wide, which is a couple feet wider than I thought it was going to be, and I like it. Goes right into our dining room. They'll be putting in a couple stairs to lead down from the dining room. We had this morning plumbers in to remediate the baseboard heating. So they removed and rerouted that piping underneath the floor in the basement. Our bay window looks great. Overlooks our backyard. Bumps out from the outside. I like it. The window that was looking out from the kitchen over the kitchen sink is now cut out. This is just going to be an opening. It'll look a little nicer once it gets drywalled. While these guys were busy doing all that work, I was building those faux beams that are going on the ceiling. So I'm building these beams in the same way that I built the mantle. I'm going to leave a link down below to the video that I watched on YouTube that really helped me out. The guy goes into a ton of detail, and he does it the right way. For one thing, my mantle, when I built it, was about 4 feet long, and it's easier to work with. These beams I'm making out of, it's actually 16-foot pieces of lumber. I hacked off a foot, so it was 15 feet, so it would fit into my garage. So here are my beams. I've already mitered the edges. I put a 45-degree angle on each of them. 3 boards per beam. And you can see it's got a warp in it. One of the pieces has a crown on there. These are not going to match up perfectly. And if I had a joiner, I would have used it. It would have made my life a whole lot easier. But I don't have a joiner to make my sides nice and even. So I knew going into this that when I miter the edges and I try to match them up, they're not going to match up perfectly. But all of that was okay with me because I'm making rustic looking barn beams. So if they look a little bit warped, that's okay. It's kind of the look I'm going for anyway. I turn them upside down, I use tape, and I tape them all along the edge. And you can see that seam where it definitely does not meet up. Bear with me, we're going to work with it. I then flipped the pieces over, used some Titebond 3 wood glue, and ran it into the seams. I then folded the pieces up with the tape on the back side now, and clamped these in place. I used these boards as spacers to kind of hold them up there. And then I let it sit overnight and let it dry. I did 1 beam per night because I didn't have enough clamps, so I waited until that beam was finished, and then I took the clamps off and I glued up my second beam. Then took the beams outside to be sanded. Now here you can see the overlap. It's massive, which means this is going to take a lot of sanding. There's also gaps in here, but it's holding sturdy. I put a lot of glue in here, and this probably took me about an hour and a half of sanding just to get the edges to meet up. I worked with an 80 grit sandpaper to get rid of as much wood as I possibly could. And in the end, I didn't really care about really working it down to a fine 220 since these are going to be rustic looking and they're going to be up on the ceiling. Nobody's going to be touching them. With the mantle, I spent a lot more time going from 80 grit all the way down to 220 grit to make sure it was like silky smooth. This was not that important. After I got my edges worn down, the fun part is to go in and grab anything that I thought would make a good dent or scratch mark into the wood. The idea here is to really bang them up and make them look rustic and tooled and weathered over time. So there's really no right or wrong way of doing this. Just trying to bang it up and be as random as possible with the marks I'm putting in it. And all these dents and scratches are really going to stand out once I get the stain on it. Once they're banged up pretty good, it's time to throw in some wood filler to try to fill in those gaps. I really tried to pack it into the creases. In all honesty, I probably went through almost an entire tube of wood filler between these 2 beams. Once that dried, it was back to sanding again. This time I used a 180 grit sandpaper. And honestly, I finished this, I went back, found some more crevices, a little bit more wood filler, back to sanding again. It was a back and forth until I felt like I had it pretty good. I used the same dark espresso wood stain that I used on the mantle. I'm also going to use it in several other places. Some bar stools I had redone recently I did with this same wood stain. The foot railing that I'm going to put on the bar I'm going to do with this same wood stain to kind of tie things together inside the room. After they were both all stained up, I let them sit overnight to dry. I then finished them off with a polyacrylic water-based sealer. I went with a satin finish. On the mantle, I ended up using a glossy finish. This one's not going to have quite the shine that the mantle has. So this is the end result after another day of drying for the polyacrylic. I love the way these things turned out. They really look like old barn beams. And the seams, while they're not perfect, if you get within a couple inches of it, or some places you can notice a little bit more. But honestly, on the ceiling, I really don't think anybody's going to notice any of the imperfections that I'm going to notice when I see it. So I can't wait to see what these things look like when they're up there on the ceiling. Also, a disclaimer, these beams are about 15 feet long, and the span that I need to cover is probably about 12 to 13 feet, which means these are going to be cut off on the ends so that they fit on the vaulted ceiling. So big progress this week. Next week, the contractors are bringing in the drywallers, and it'll be nice once we finally have walls up. As always, if you want to keep up on the progress, you can subscribe or just check back here next week.